Bueno, pues muy buenos días a todas y todos. Gracias por acompañarnos en este tercer día de la Semana de Experiencia del Paciente 2025. Hoy comenzamos con una experiencia distinta. Hoy es una experiencia vivencial y profundamente transformadora. Tendremos el privilegio de aprender con Karl, director de Health Action Training, y con Zoe Mejía, quienes nos guiarán en un recorrido único a través del teatro aplicado a la salud. Porque más que una técnica, lo que exploraremos hoy es una forma de reconectar con lo humano a través de la escucha, la empatía y la comunicación efectiva en contextos clínicos. Entonces, los invito a abrirse, a participar activamente y a dejarse sorprender, porque cuidar también es arte y se puede entrenar. Bienvenidos y muchísimas gracias, Karl. Thank you, Karl. Gracias, Zoe. Voy a presentarles a Zoe y a Karl en un segundo. Y entonces el doctor Karl es escritor y facilitador e investigador. Karl realizó un doctorado interdisciplinario en enfermería y teatro en la Universidad de Ulster, pionero en integrar el teatro dramático en la formación de profesionales de salud, y es cofundador y director de Health Action Training en el Reino Unido, organización que ofrece entrenamientos centrados en la persona utilizando metodologías teatrales aplicadas. Ha publicado y presentado ampliamente en los campos de la enfermería y el teatro, y actualmente lidera programas de formación y mejora de la calidad e investigación en Health Action Training. Y Zoe Mejía, ella es enfermera mexicana comprometida con el derecho a la salud y el cuidado centrado en la persona. Ha liderado brigadas médico-humanitarias en comunidades vulnerables en México y Colombia, y cuenta con una experiencia en investigación bioestadística e intervenciones en salud. Es facilitadora del programa Health Action Training, donde colabora en la adaptación del curso de habilidades comunicativas en la práctica centrada en la persona, y además participa activamente en redes internacionales de enfermería digital como el Digital Team of International Network of Nursing and Informatics y en el Nursing Now. Bienvenidos, muchísimas gracias. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. And yeah, the stage is yours. If you want to start, please welcome.
Thank you, Humana. And first thing I'll say is apologies that for myself anyway, I'll be speaking in English. That's my own inability to speak any other language. I am really bad at learning other languages. I've tried very hard to learn Italian, French, Spanish, a few others. And for some reason, my brain isn't wired that way. I can barely speak English. Maybe that's why. So first off, apologies that my presentation, the elements of my presentation will have to be in English. That's because of my deficiencies and nothing else. And yeah, so folks, I'm really excited to be here, and thank you, Humana, for the introduction and for inviting us to speak at this kind of week of celebrations, coinciding with International Day of the Midwife, International Day of Nurses, and many other international celebrations about healthcare, and in particular this week about patient experience. And Humana invited us to talk about something called person-centered practice, which may be a new concept to some, maybe it's more familiar to others. We're going to go through it in various levels of detail, but with only an hour or so, there's only so much detail we can achieve. So if you have more questions, if you want to find out more, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we can help out more. And there's other ways that you can kind of join in what we do as well. So I'm going to start by kind of getting our presentation slides going, and then I won't have to introduce myself much because Humana has already done so for us. So our talk today is titled The Art of Care, and in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about Health Action Training, the company that I co-founded and direct, and a little bit about what we mean by the art of care in relation to person-centered practice, and how we use theatre and other arts-based practices to enhance healthcare, and in particular healthcare education, because our our mentality with what we do is patients will have a better experience if staff are better trained. And also, the role of staff in self-care and looking after themselves is chronically underexplored and needs much more attention than it currently receives. So without further ado, I'm going to talk a little bit less about me and Zoe, who we are, and tell you about what Health Action is and what we do. You can see in that photo there's some of the core team members at Health Action Training. Some have actually changed, and it's always nice to see some faces there that are still with us, doing different things and so on. But you can see here that there's a few different areas that we try to kind of explore and to look at in terms of healthcare. And these are some of our core kind of areas we look at. I'm not going to list them. I'll allow you to have a look through yourself. But fundamentally, we're a training company and we use arts-based approaches, primarily drama and theatre-based approaches to enhance healthcare education. For the most part, we do that with nurses. That's because our background mostly as a team is in nursing, but we have worked with social workers, with medical professionals, ambulance staff, journalists, corporate leaders, many, many others as well, primarily in the healthcare services and areas. So that's us in a nutshell. We're based in the UK as well, I should say. You can see in the bottom there where we are in Derry, Londonderry, the town with two names, in Northern Ireland, in the UK, as close as you can get in the UK to being in Ireland without being technically in Ireland. It's a complicated history. We won't go into it for today. So that's who we are, Health Action Training. So let's talk a little bit more about what makes us us. And one of the key things that makes us us is participation and interactivity and doing as a process for education. And that comes very much from how we are focused in drama and theatre. I was a theatre undergraduate and a performing arts undergraduate and a master's student. So my origins are in theatre, drama, and performance. And in that process, when you learn about drama, about theatre, performance studies, and all of these different things, whether you're learning about theory or practice, often the preset is about interactive participation, dialogue, all of these different forms of learning processes. When I moved into working with nursing and healthcare professionals in general, I noticed that that's not the case for many of them. For many of them, it's sit down, have a presentation at you, you learn, that's how you learn. And I thought that was a little bit outdated. So one of the main reasons we do what we do is to show a different way of learning to folks. So we're going to start off with some interactive, participative exercises. So we invite you, if you can, please, to unmute yourself, to turn your cameras on if you're comfortable having your cameras on. And we're going to go through 3 core practices that we use in pretty much every session that we use, and that's breathing, centering, and warming up. They're core to everything we do because it's about preparing ourselves for the work we're about to do. In drama and theatre, we might be preparing ourselves for a performance or for a long day of rehearsals. For healthcare professionals, you're preparing yourself for a 12-hour shift, for example, where you're going to be saving people's lives, talking very quickly with colleagues, making very difficult decisions in difficult circumstances as quickly as you can to save as many people as you can. So it's a very difficult workplace you're about to go into. So these 3 core principles of breathing, centering, and warming up helps us to prepare for those activities. So let's share a few with you now. And the first one, I'm going to hand over to Zoe to take us through. Zoe, go ahead.
Thank you, Karl. I will lead this one in Spanish to be able to communicate better the exercise. Este es un ejercicio de respiración. Como decía Karl, la respiración para los profesionales de la salud es un punto clave de preparación para las horas que tenemos que trabajar. Los ejercicios de respiración que utilizamos en Health Action Training vienen de diferentes fuentes, de diferentes corrientes, particularmente de James Nestor, que escribe o hace este compendio de diferentes técnicas de respiración y la evidencia científica que respalda las diferentes acciones que tienen los diferentes tipos de respiración en el cuerpo. y cómo utilizarlo en diferentes escenarios. Este en particular, que se llama nostril to nostril, también conocido como Nadishal Hana o respiración nasal alternada. Para esto, pues quienes puedan tener su cámara prendida sería genial. Les vamos a pedir que tomen esta posición con sus dedos, como que bajamos los dos dedos, el índice y el anular, y nos quedamos, el índice y el medio, nos quedamos con el anular, el meñique y el dedo pulgar. Con esta posición, con la mano derecha, vamos a tapar la fosa nasal derecha y vamos a exhalar por la fosa nasal izquierda. Después inhalamos por esa misma fosa, solo para prepararnos, y vamos a hacer el cambio a la fosa derecha. Vamos a tapar las dos fosas por un segundo, vamos a sostener un poco ahí la respiración, unos segundos, y volvemos a abrir, pero del lado derecho. Recordemos que teníamos el aire adentro, entonces vamos a hacer el aire afuera durante unos segundos y respiramos hacia adentro. Cerramos unos segundos, abrimos y exhalamos e inhalamos. Cerramos nuevamente, abrimos, exhalamos e inhalamos. Vamos a hacerlo una vez más. Cerramos brevemente, abrimos, exhalamos e inhalamos. Esta es la posición recomendada, pero en realidad podemos hacerlo como nos sea más fácil. Y como vemos acá en un azul un poco más hacia el verde, este ejercicio activa los canales parasintéticos y simpatéticos del sistema simpático y parasimpático del sistema nervioso, lo que hace que pues activemos nuestra concentración, nuestro foco, sí en la respiración, pero también en la concentración de lo que estamos haciendo y de lo que está pasando. Es un ejercicio muy interesante porque activa los dos canales. Y creo que para el siguiente ejercicio vamos a continuar con Karl. You can continue with the next one.
Thank you, Zoe. And the next part is centering. Centering being very important before we enter a shift, before we start our work, or perhaps after something stressful has happened and we want to get centered before we speak to someone else. And this is one of the exercises we use quite a lot, and it comes from Arawana Hayashi, who is from Japan, and she created something called social presencing theatre. And it's got links to Zen Buddhism, meditation practices, mindful practices. So I'm going to take you through it. So first thing I'd like you to do is to plant your feet firmly on the ground. Feel the connection that your feet makes with the ground, whatever ground your feet is on, whether it's carpet, stone, earth, who knows. Whatever your feet can feel, just feel the connection that your feet make with that. I want you to imagine that your feet are the roots of a tree or a big plant going into Mother Earth, rooting you in place. And now I want you to turn your attention to your spine, to your backbone. And I want you to imagine from the bottom to the top, energy like fire rising in your spine. Your spine lengthens and strengthens. Your spine is strong. It keeps you stable. It keeps you going in the most difficult of times. Now turn your attention to your front, your chest, your heart. And I want you to imagine that it is soft and open. It is welcoming. to all of the joy and to all of the sorrow in the world. And lastly, bring your attention to your head and imagine above you, above your head, all around your head, there is an infinite sky of potential. Your feet rooting you to your place on Mother Earth, your spine keeping you strong throughout all of the hardships you face, and your heart open to all of the joy, all of the sorrow, everything that life has to offer. And then above your head, an infinite sky of possibilities. And if you've closed your eyes, I would like you to gently open your eyes whenever you feel ready to. And I want you to look at something you can see. And I want you to think, what shape is that? Is it a ball? Are you looking at something round like a ball? Or is it a piece of paper, flat? Just think, what is the shape of that? And turn your attention towards your hearing. What can you hear? What's the thing closest to you that you can hear? For example, I can hear my laptop whirring gently, humming. This is the really important part of Arowana Hayashi's centering and meditation. So it's not just about going in to oneself, to yourself, and you're being mindful. It's about what can you see in the world? What's your presence in the world? So that's that exercise. It's a very meditative, very, we find it very calming. Some people don't, but hopefully you do. And I'm going to hand straight over to Zoe to take us through more of a warm-up, which should be very exciting.
Yeah, this is a really good one. I will lead it in Spanish again. Sé que esta presentación también va a quedar grabada y tal vez la van a compartir después con algunos de las personas que forman parte de la comunidad de Happy Clinic Ideas. So, ojalá que lo puedan ver y ojalá que lo puedan intentar, aunque sea a través de la grabación. Y para quienes están acá y que entiendo que pueden estar trabajando, que pueden estar en el transporte, etcétera, pues ojalá puedan escuchar las indicaciones e imaginarse cómo sería para ustedes estarlo haciendo. Y también si pueden ver la imagen sería genial. So, les voy a pedir a quienes puedan que se levanten de su lugar y a medida de lo posible tengan pues precaución de cuidar su espacio, ¿no? Que no choquen con nada, no se vayan a golpear ni que vayan a hacer algún daño. Este es un ejercicio que viene del Aikido, que nos recuerda a la conexión que tiene nuestro cuerpo con la energía que tiene nuestro cuerpo y el movimiento que podemos hacer con el cuerpo. A la vez que nosotros dentro de Head Action Training lo utilizamos como una forma de motivar la presencia plena del cuerpo, de la mente, de la energía, de la intención en el momento en el que nos encontramos y con el grupo con el que nos encontramos. Entonces este ejercicio lo vamos a hacer un par de veces con instrucciones y la tercera vez lo vamos a hacer sin la instrucción, buscando que quienes estamos presentes en este momento y quienes podrán ver tal vez después la grabación, pues tratemos de igualar el ritmo con el que hacemos el ejercicio. Entonces vamos a iniciar con los pies bien plantados en el piso, que nuestra espalda esté derecha, que nuestros hombros estén cómodos, nuestros brazos también estén relajados, nuestros hombros. Vamos a colocar nuestras manos en esta posición a la altura de nuestro ombligo, un poquito por arriba, que es donde se encuentra nuestro centro energético, nuestro centro de gravedad también. Y a partir de aquí vamos a inhalar mientras subimos las manos a la altura de la barbilla más o menos. Le damos la vuelta a nuestras manos y exhalamos. Y conforme vamos exhalando, bajando las manos, También vamos bajando el cuello poco a poco, vértebra por vértebra, y seguimos bajando hasta que llegamos al piso o hasta donde podamos llegar. Recordemos que estamos exhalando. Ahora vamos a ir subiendo vértebra por vértebra mientras inhalamos por la boca y vamos a abrir los brazos hacia los lados, como tomando una gran bocanada de aire. Llegamos hasta arriba y, importante, volteamos a ver nuestras manos. Exhalamos mientras las bajamos al frente, ¿sí? Y una vez que están abajo, inhalamos mientras las subimos lentamente, viendo hacia el cielo. Y exhalamos hacia afuera, hacia los lados. Y vamos a inhalar nuevamente hacia afuera, hacia los lados, con las palmas viendo hacia arriba. Y esta vez, a la hora de exhalar, juntamos nuestras manos e intentamos sacar todo el aire de una sola vez. Y bajamos los brazos también de una sola vez. Se vería algo así. Y si intentan sentir ese movimiento de inhalación y exhalación, sentirán que cuando hacemos este movimiento, nuestro cuerpo automáticamente como que quiere moverse un poco y entonces lo permitimos bueno, en inglés se llama shake, ¿no? Dejamos que se mueva un poco el cuerpo. Entonces vamos a intentar hacerlo una vez más. Podemos sacudirnos un poco, las manos en el centro, en nuestro centro. Inhalamos. Giramos y exhalamos. Bajamos lentamente, vértebra por vértebra, hasta donde podamos y podemos tocar el suelo. Inhalamos con los brazos a los costados. Subimos por encima de la cabeza, volteamos a ver nuestras manos. Bajamos lentamente mientras exhalamos. Inhalamos con las manos hacia el frente, las palmas viendo hacia el cielo. Exhalamos hacia los lados. Inhalamos hacia los lados. Y sacamos de un solo movimiento. Nos sacudimos un poquito y esta última vez, una vez que reconocimos los movimientos que tenemos que hacer y el ritmo de la respiración y los movimientos, vamos a intentar hacerlos sin las instrucciones y a medida de lo posible tratar de igualar el ritmo con el que lo realizamos, ¿vale? Entonces iniciamos con las manos en nuestro centro e inhalamos. Sacudimos un poco la energía y como pueden ver en esta, bueno, podemos tomar asientos si es que pudieran estar de pie. Y como pueden ver en esta en estas anotaciones, pues nos ayuda a coordinar tanto el cuerpo como la presencia y coordinarla con el equipo. Vamos a continuar con la presentación y Karl va a continuar con lo siguiente. Muchas gracias. Karl, you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you. It was really beautiful to synchronize with you and Jimena there in the video, even though I'm
No pueden mirar tu historia, que no tiene acceso, le prohibieron el acceso, que está en salud pública.
Lewis Cahill. There was some noise coming from your microphone and just muted you there. Yeah, thank you, Zoe. So breathing, centering and warming up, folks, really, really important parts of our practices. And for us, the key part is to do this. Knowing about it's great, but doing it is the important part. And we do them for different purposes as well. We're very keen on the idea of purposeful activities. So, for example, the nostril to nostril breathing, as Zoe mentioned, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes the sympathetic nervous system as well, but mostly the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to rest, helps us to de-stress, and helps us to take away anxiety from our body, lower our heart rate, reduce cortisol stress, all of these different elements. So it's really useful to do after a very stressful situation. Whatever that might be for you with the work that you do. But let's get into doing some of the talking about elements of our session today. So we want to tackle this term of person-centered practice and give you a very quick overview of what person-centered practice is. And hopefully you've come across this term before and have some insights. If not, don't worry. Hopefully we can lay some groundwork for you. So here are some principles in person-centered practice. So in principle, what it's trying to do is resist mechanization, objectification, and over-medicalization. This doesn't mean that being person-centered means that we dismiss medicine and the wonderful healing powers of medicine and medics. It's about rebalancing the notion that we can be reduced to a number, to a bed in a ward. Instead of me being Karl, I might be bed number 4 or room number 4. Person-centered practice dismisses that and says, no, Karl is always Karl. He's never bed number 4. So in that way, it's an attempt to humanize healthcare, to make sure that we remember what's important about the human in healthcare experiences. It hinges on this concept called personhood, which comes from Carl Rogers, who created something called person-centered therapy or talking therapies. You may be more familiar with the idea of a talking therapy. And then Tom Kitwood took this into nursing more particular. But what's interesting about Tom Kitwood's work is that he was doing it from the perspective of patients living with dementia. Often we think about our personhood, our humanity, as our ability to think, our ability to speak, to reason, all of these different elements. Someone living with dementia has a limited capacity for that, but they're still a person, they're still a human being. So there is something more fundamental to what makes us a person than being able to think clearly, to remember all of these different things that is problematized or made difficult when you are living with dementia. So it's a very interesting, I think, shift of this idea of personhood as more than just that ability to think clearly and rationalize. Probably the core principle of person-centered practice comes from Carl Rogers, and it's unconditional positive regard. Very simply, it means that regardless of who you are, if I am trying to care for you in a person-centered way, I should start from a position of whoever you are, I have positive regard for you as a person. I give you dignity. I give you respect. Carl Rogers was speaking from the perspective of providing therapy for people he fundamentally and politically disagreed with. And he said this was very difficult for him to do, but he found it very important to do from a person-centered practice. Just because he disagreed with this person's viewpoints politically didn't mean he shouldn't care for him with dignity and respect. And I think it's a foundational principle of person-centered practice. So you might have heard of the term patient-centered. That has more global acknowledgement than person-centered does at this point in time. There are some very strong links between the two ideas, but I think there are some very important differences that takes person-centeredness to a different level than patient-centeredness does. So as simply as we can explain in the time we have, patient-centered practice looks to individualize healthcare. In other words, to see each individual as needing different approaches to care, whether that's a different amount of medication, a different way to communicate with each other, a different social support system. But it says that me and Zoe, for example, Zoe and I require different things in our healthcare. What works for me might not work in the same way for Zoe, and vice versa. So that's a positive. However, what that means when we think of patient-centeredness is that we put a person in the role of a patient, and we are focused on their ailment or their condition or something that we can help them with, something we can cure. That means we don't see what's important to them beyond that idea of them as a patient. It automatically makes us in a different position, a different status to them. And also doesn't include what's important, like beliefs, values, religious belief. All of these different things is crucial to how someone wants to be treated. What it also means is that the nurse or the doctor or the healthcare provider, the family of the patients, everybody involved in that care process is less of a factor in patient-centeredness because it's about that person. Whereas with person-centeredness, every person is important in that care process. Of course, there's someone who needs more care than others do, but it recognizes that doctors, nurses, social workers, therapists, whoever you are, also you require care. You require the right working conditions. You require things to be in place to be a competent practitioner. So if we don't see that, if we don't prioritize that as person-centeredness does, we lose sight of that. We lose practitioners as a result of that. They are complementary approaches. They're not competing. It's not as if person-centeredness is trying to beat patient-centeredness. They are complementary approaches. There are also many other types of approaches that have the same roots as these two. And there's just two listed there, family-centered or relationship-centered. There's many, many others. Why I like person-centered is because you can see person-centeredness in all of these other types of practices. Person-centeredness seems to be the most reduced point for these approaches to care, in my opinion. We can talk more about that in the Q&A if you have any thoughts to that, but for now we'll leave that where that is. There are frameworks out there, and this is unsurprisingly my favorite because it was created by my PhD supervisors pictured there, Professors Tanya McCants and Professor Brendan McCormack. And they created this framework. They've created it originally as a person-centered nursing framework. They've spent many, many years updating that to be the person-centered practice framework, so it's relatable across lots of different practices. They've even updated it to be curriculum-focused and many other areas where they're really growing this framework. The idea of this framework is to put person-centeredness into practice. That's the aim of this framework. And I'm not going to go through in too much detail, but as you can see with this framework, there are multiple levels that go from the outside, from wide contexts, to very, very kind of what they call micro context, as in what we do with other people. And that's the processes that lead to good care outcomes. So it tries to encapsulate every level of healthcare if it can. Sometimes it doesn't achieve that, but it tries its best to. A quick word kind of on that and some shameless self-promotion. Christmas Day last year was the day that my book was published. And this is a book that came from my PhD studies. Many, many years of work went into this book. It's available now, and you can see kind of what it looks at. So if this is something that's interesting to you, I tried very hard to make the ideas of applied drama and person-centered practice person-centered nursing in particular in this book, very clear for people who don't know what that term means, because I wanted to speak to both drama professionals who wanted to do more of this work and person-centered nursing professionals who wanted to know more about what applied drama is and how they could use it. So I think it's a very good starting point for understanding person-centeredness as a concept, as well as applied drama as a concept, and how that works, how you can apply drama into healthcare, for example. I'm going to hand over to Zoe to kind of give much more context on what those concepts and practices might mean in this specific context of Latin American nurses, healthcare professionals. Zoe.
Thank you so much, Karl. Solo para puntualizar algunas diferencias que hemos encontrado, porque actualmente nos encontramos en un proyecto de 3 años en el que estamos traduciendo y adaptando culturalmente, de cierta manera, el curso básico de Health Action Training al español. El próximo año lo estaremos otorgando, entregando en español. Y dentro de este viaje de la traducción, pues hemos encontrado que también la perspectiva cambia, pues de país a país, de continente a continente, incluso pues algunas referencias que hemos encontrado de Latinoamérica versus lo que hemos encontrado de España, pues estamos trabajando como para unificar un poco, no unificarlo, sino ponerlo en conjunto, ¿no? Que cómo en habla hispana nos referimos a la atención centrada en el paciente y cómo nos referimos a la atención centrada en la persona. Porque sí, como mencionaba acá, pues hay diferencias sustanciales que si bien no son competitivas, pues es importante saber por qué tal vez una puede ser útil en un contexto y otra puede ser más útil en otro contexto, ¿no? Entonces, el foco principal de la atención centrada en el paciente, pues es el estado clínico, ¿no? El episodio clínico, el motivo de consulta, la situación que hay que resolver en términos de salud y digamos, por otro lado, la atención centrada en la persona, pues aborda un proceso más amplio, un proceso más contextual de cómo llega esta persona a esta situación de salud, bajo qué circunstancias contextuales de familia, trabajo, economía, como cierta responsabilidad sobre su propia salud y herramientas que tiene sobre su propia salud pueden ser activadas durante todo este proceso. La atención centrada en el paciente, vemos en Latinoamérica y bueno, y en Estados Unidos también, Canadá, se aplica mucho desde esta perspectiva del paciente como cliente, a quien le debemos un servicio, pero pues bajo este término de intercambio económico y de intercambio de responsabilidad, más como en este aspecto legal y económico, ¿no? Entonces lo podemos ver presente desde hace algunos años, desde esta perspectiva de customer experience, más que como de la persona quien vive una situación de salud y experimenta cambios en su estilo de vida, etcétera, más bien como de qué es lo que quiere el cliente y por eso lo vemos presente en algunas clínicas privadas, tanto en México como en Chile, Colombia, que han trabajado sobre todo como por sus modelos de atención a la salud, tienen estos modelos, bueno, especialmente Chile, Colombia, Argentina, que tienen estos modelos un poco como híbridos entre la atención privada y la atención pública a través de las aseguradoras, pues han trabajado mucho en esta parte, aunque también pues he visto últimamente que en Chile pues también hay ya mucho acercamiento hacia la parte más pública y que se acerca mucho más la atención centrada en el paciente a la atención centrada en la persona, que como vemos en algunos de los ejemplos, pues son estrategias que son más ampliadas, ¿no? Una estrategia de la familia en Brasil que aborda las situaciones de salud, sobre todo las situaciones crónicas complejas, pues desde una perspectiva familiar y cómo ese soporte es necesario para cursar estas situaciones de salud para las personas, estas redes de salud familiar y comunitaria, donde se entrena también a actores comunitarios para apoyar esta atención en salud. Entonces, pues estamos viendo estos cambios hacia allá o estas transformaciones o complementando las diferentes perspectivas. Muchas gracias, Luz, por tus comentarios. Saludos a Colombia. Can you go next, Karl, please? Rápidamente, de verdad, muy rápidamente, algo que nos gusta ver en HAT, porque recordemos que es Health Action Training, siempre la invitación es a tomar acción frente a los retos. Entonces, pues vemos que tenemos sistemas fragmentados, que no ven a la persona como una unidad, que se pierden en todas estas características que envuelven la experiencia de salud, que tenemos una pérdida del trabajo colaborativo entre profesionales de la salud y pues que incluyan a las personas que experimentan cualquiera de las situaciones por las que podemos cursar, pero son retos que se convierten en oportunidades, ¿no? Entonces, hay una gran oportunidad para la atención primaria en la salud en términos de prevención secundaria, el uso de tecnologías para aumentar el seguimiento personalizado, promover esta co-creación pues con todos los actores, ¿no? Desde administración y me da mucho gusto que Happy Clinic también está pues sumando mucho a esta perspectiva de la co-creación, del uso de tecnologías y fortaleciendo pues también esta perspectiva de invitar a la mesa a las personas que experimentan las situaciones de salud que estemos abordando, ¿no? Entonces también esta perspectiva de trabajar de cerca con las comunidades y desde un diseño integrativo de estas experiencias, pues es algo que podemos ver cada vez más en Latinoamérica y que afortunadamente todos los que estemos aquí, que fueron parte de la comunidad de Happy Clinic, de Health Action Training, de estas comunidades que conjugamos en diferentes espacios, pues qué bueno. Eso es. Muchas gracias, Karl. You can continue.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm mindful of time. So
Yeah.
what I'm going to do is go through these next slides quite quickly and then open for any questions that folks might have. So we were going to take everyone through another of our activities, which is called creative personal reflection, where we use creative writing and journaling to reflect on the experiences we have within our courses, but also within our professional practices, that serves as a really useful approach to understanding those experiences and applying growth to those situations so that we can better ourselves the next time we come across situations like that. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do an example of that, but that's just a very quick mention that that's something we do. Yeah, unfortunately, we won't be able to do that today. The next thing I want to talk about very briefly, and maybe open it up to questions rather than talk too much about it, is a concept called sympathetic presence. It's the core concept in my PhD, where we explored it and discovered that drama-based approaches seems like a very useful way to explore what sympathetic presence might mean. I think it's because sympathetic presence is where the art of care happens. It's where we feel things between people, where we use our sensations, where we use our instincts, where we use creative impulse to better care for others. But what is sympathetic presence? And as quickly as I can, there's a couple of quotes here. It comes from Professors McCormack and McCants, and they define it as an engagement that recognizes the uniqueness and value of the individual by appropriately responding to cues. You can see a quote from me there as well. I'll let you read that in your own time. What this means is it moves it away from the concept of empathy, whereas empathy is I understand how you're feeling and your experiences. Sympathetic presence says my experience is different to your experience, and I will respond appropriately to what you are showing me your experience is. We can talk more about that if you like. It's quite a deep concept, which is very difficult to summarize in half an hour. Some key things about why it's different from empathy. So first off, empathy is not possible. I can't feel the same feelings that Zoe feels, that Humana feels, or that anybody else on this call feels. So empathy, by its definition of I feel your feelings, is not possible. Secondly, empathy is passive. Empathy is a feeling we have within ourselves, whereas sympathetic presence is interrelational, it's interactive. We are with someone else whilst we're trying to respond to what they're giving of their experience. And the next part, it moves from understanding that feeling to recognizing it. It doesn't matter if you've broken your leg and someone else has broken their leg too. That experience will be very different for you and that other person. You will never understand the feeling that someone has, but you can recognize that feeling. You can attend to that feeling. You can work with that feeling. And that's the last part, is that sympathetic presence is something called pragmatic. It's practically achievable, and it is also helpful in a healthcare context. Empathy has been evidenced to be, at times, unhelpful in a healthcare context. It can lead to burnout. It can lead to stereotyping, assumptions, manipulation, and so on and so forth. Sympathetic presence is by no means perfect, and empathy is by no means a terrible thing. In fact, Hojat theorized that they are two ends of a spectrum, and in the middle is where we find compassion. And compassion is something definitely to be aimed for. A wealth of research out there that says that when we take compassionate action, not only do we make better changes in the world around us, for the people around us, we improve our self-worth, our well-being, and our health as well. So finding that balance between empathy and sympathy to be more compassionate is incredibly important. Zoe, a few words before we open for Q&A on that in the English context. Good luck.
Yeah, I just put this because it's part of the work we are making for this translation project. So traducir este concepto de sympathetic presence al español ha sido muy complejo, no solo para nosotros, sino en general los años que tiene en el contexto, ha sido complejo asignarle solo una palabra, ¿no? Entonces hay algunas que circulan en este sentido, ¿no? Como esta presencia compasiva, como una atención plena, que también ya conocemos como mindfulness, etc. The next one, please, Karl. Lo que hemos hasta ahora consensuado un poco, ¿no? Entre el equipo y utilizando referencias pues de Latinoamérica y de España, es que el sympathetic presence es la presencia auténtica, sensible y emocionalmente disponible del profesional de la salud frente a la persona que está cuidando o a la persona que está atendiendo, y que reconoce que está en una experiencia de salud que es compleja, donde puede haber vulnerabilidad, de sufrimiento, entre otras cosas, aunque también puede haber alegría, ¿no? También puede haber alivio, también puede haber otro tipo de situaciones, ¿no? Entonces, es en realidad, sympathetic presence es una forma en la que se activan estas habilidades blandas, estas habilidades humanas de las que hemos hablado muchísimo y seguramente seguiremos hablando y nos seguiremos entrenando en ellas, activa estas habilidades y responde a las necesidades de la persona en ese momento, en ese lugar, en lo que está sucediendo en ese momento, y fomenta estos entornos en los que también visualizamos que a través de esta experiencia de salud que me incluye a mí como enfermera, pues también me transforma, que también me hace reflexionar, que también me hace conocer mis propias emociones, mis propios valores, mis propios principios, cuestionar mi propia realidad, mis propios privilegios, mis propias situaciones en las que me encuentro. Y entonces, pues todo eso es sympathetic, pues, como decía Karl, es algo pragmático, es algo que es vivencial, que se pone en práctica en el día a día. No solamente es escuchar activamente, no solamente es tal, sino es como un conjunto de acciones que realizamos, de habilidades que activamos y que acciones que realizamos hacia los otros y con los otros. Thank you. I think that is the main summary for this, Karl.
Yeah, and we were going to share one more piece of practice with everyone. We're not going to because of time as well, but just a brief explanation of this activity. Our core skill set that we teach is about person-centered communication, and we do that using actor training techniques from Konstantin Stanislavski called actions and objectives. Very simply, it's about knowing what you want to achieve and then using actions to achieve that. And an action is something you do with another person. And it has to fit in the phrase, I am something with you, I am listening to you or with you. For example, listen is an action. So that's what we teach as a core process of our communication. And it starts from thinking the thought, I'm listening to you, I'm respecting you, I'm acknowledging you, I'm maybe sometimes ignoring you. And unfortunately, sometimes we do that without thinking. When we start thinking and being conscious with our actions, that's when some good person-centered communication happens. But we haven't time for that. So maybe join our courses and you can take part in more practices.
Yeah, absolutely, they should.
There's some information there on those which we won't stay with. And we're going to do a short role play as well, but time has got away from us. So what we'll finish with is just kind of an open invitation. We have courses that are coming up and they are funded by our partners, so we can offer them free to nurses and healthcare professionals. It's mostly nurses, I must say, because it's a nursing program, but you can reach out to us and ask whether you think that if you're a medic, maybe if you're a social worker, psychiatrist, whatever you are, whether you'd be welcome. Most often than not, you'd be welcome, but it is mostly for nurses. So we have courses in English coming up very soon in June, and then we have more over the next 3 years in English. But most excitingly, we have a version of this course delivered entirely in Spanish. And Zoe is one of the leaders of that program, and I'm really excited for that to happen. We are aiming for that to run, as you can see there, in June 2026. All being well, if everything goes to plan. So if you're interested in joining either of those courses, we have some links where you can join a waiting list, and then you can hear the most up-to-date information about when you can register for those courses. So do let us know if you're interested in those. Zoe maybe will be sharing the links in the chat box if you have them ready to go, Zoe, because I don't. And let's, for the last few minutes, open to some questions if anybody has any questions. Thank you for listening. And thank you for your patience with me not being able to speak Spanish.
Thank you so much, Karl. And don't worry, the technology is, I don't know, it's improving all our languages skills. Ya, Zoe está poniendo los datos de los cursos y dónde pueden contactarlos. Pero bueno, si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, algún comentario, claro, Alfonso, por favor.
Hola, Jimena, ¿cómo estás? Hi, Carl. Thank you for your presentation, also for Zoe. Sorry, I'm not turning on my camera and I'm feeling a bit under the weather, but I got a question. What are the best practices to introduce those, I don't know, how this health action, these practices into your personal, into your administration collaborators? Like, I don't know how to teach them those practices, how to make them practice them all every day, and so on. What can you recommend?
A really excellent. Thank you for the question, Alfonso, and thank you. Really good question. The easiest activities to share are breathing exercises. We all breathe, but we often don't breathe with conscious thought and attention. And if we can find, we can share a few breathing exercises with you. We shared nostril to nostril. We have a whole host of other ones that we can share. The internet is awash with wonderful breathing exercises too, so you can have a look and find your favorites. Sharing them and underlining this idea is key, is if we do breathing exercises once, fantastic, that's really useful. But if, like going to the gym, if we went to the gym and we lifted some weights, if we did that once, we wouldn't suddenly think that we're incredibly strong and fit and never need to go again. We understand when we go to look after our physical health through going to the gym or whatever it is, that we need to do it more often. We need to make it a habit. So it's the same with self-care activities like breathing. We need to make it a habit. Something that we found helpful to share with people if they're maybe slightly reluctant or they can't find time to do breathing exercises is, say, when you're brushing your teeth, practice a breathing exercise. Just before eating your breakfast, practice a breathing exercise. So link it to something that people do already, and that helps to build it as a habit. Zoe, is there anything you'd add to that as a from your perspective, Zoe?
Yeah, I think we should apply all these techniques, the presencing, the centering, the breathing, the active listening in our daily life. I mean, if we are on the line for the tortillas, or if we are waiting in for a paperwork or whatever, we should be attentive of what is happening around us in all the time, all time. I think this is a principle for security also, that you be aware where you are and what is happening and who is around you. So if you try to apply that, or you invite people to apply that in every day, just look around how many people you can see in that waiting room, how many people you make eye contact during your transportation home or work or wherever. Just a little detail, I think you will bring that skill into a really useful tool for any other setting. So that is also the invitation, like run the activities in your daily activities, just try it, and that's it. Thanks, Alfonso. Thanks, Karl.
Perfecto, muchas gracias.
Gracias, Alfonso. Estamos justo en tiempo. Entonces, no sé si alguien tiene alguna última pregunta, si no, para agradecerles a los ponentes y, bueno, podernos despedir. ¿Alguien tiene alguna última pregunta para Karl, para Zoe? No? Bueno, thank you so much for such an amazing presentation and such an amazing part of the, and a different view of our center person concepts, no? And I think it's an open dialogue that we need to have, because you say it, or Zoe say it very well, no? It's completely different here, completely different in US, completely different in UK, in Spain. So we need to understand what is happening in our context, in our cultures, in our spaces. Así que muchísimas gracias. Espero que haya sido para todos ustedes una gran presentación. Están los cursos de Health Action Training, por favor, son un gran aliado. Yo ya lo tomé, se los recomiendo ampliamente. Y bueno, creo que es una forma en la que podemos ir avanzando e ir ampliando estos conceptos que creo que nunca dejarán de abordarse, ¿no? No tendrán un fin. Así que muchísimas gracias. Nos estamos viendo y la sesión quedará grabada para quienes no pudieron asistir. Thank you so much again, Karl, Zoe, to being here.
Gracias,
Thank you
gracias
for
a todos.
hosting us. Thank you, everyone.